Hey guys, tonight we descend into the creaky, crumbling corridors of a real medieval castle. No fairy godmothers, no spotless stone halls, and certainly no indoor plumbing. You're not a prince or princess here, you're just you. Cold toes, aching back, and a growing sense that your cozy modern mattress was the height of human civilization. The first thing that hits you is the smell. It's not dramatic like a dungeon full of rats. It's more like a damp, mouldy cellar mixed with centuries of wood smoke, sweaty wool, and cabbage stew. You breathe it in and immediately regret it. Stone walls surround you, rough and pitted, like they've been through things you don't want to know about. You reach out to touch one and pull back. It's slimy with condensation, cold as regret. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from and what time is it right now? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing just inside the castle gate, the heavy oak doors groaning shut behind you. No dramatic drawbridge moment here, just wet boots, an untrustworthy torch, and a growing list of questions about what you just signed up for. This is no fantasy stronghold. It's a living, coughing, leaking place. The stone floors beneath your feet suck heat from your body like a medieval vampire. You shuffle across rush-covered halls designed to soak up spilled broth and worse. The air is thick with the smoky tang of cheap tallow candles. Flickering shadows dance across grimy tapestries, depicting battles no one remembers and saints no one can name. You pass a narrow corridor leading to the kitchen. Someone's yelling. Someone else is crying. Probably about the turnips. There's a pig trotting confidently through the hall, completely unbothered by your presence. He's probably more respected than you. There's no privacy, no quiet. Footsteps echo down every hallway. You hear a blacksmith somewhere pounding out horseshoes, and children laughing and shrieking in a way that suggests no one is supervising them. At all. A dog barks, someone coughs, someone else coughs worse. You head toward your sleeping quarters. And here's the thing, you're not getting your own chamber. Unless you're nobility, and you're not. You're crammed into a shared space with a half-dozen other people, all of whom snore like they're practicing for war. The communal room is barely heated, and the only thing standing between you and frostbite is a thin woolen blanket and your sheer will to live. Historians still argue whether castle interiors were really as gloomy as paintings make them look. But honestly, it doesn't matter when you're standing under a soot-blackened wooden beam, listening to someone fart audibly in their sleep. You climb a steep, uneven stair to the upper floor, clutching the rough stone wall because there's no banister, and medieval carpenters were apparently not big on safety standards. The ceiling is so low in places you have to duck, and you bonk your head more than once on dangling iron hooks used for something ominous. When you finally reach the chamber, if you can call it that, it's just a room. A low-ceilinged, drafty cell with wooden pallets on the floor, a few lumps of straw pretending to be mattresses, and a single candle trying its best. Someone's already in your corner. You're not even surprised. You drag your straw bedding to a spot near the wall, avoiding a suspicious stain. As you settle down, a rat scampers past your boot. You name him Gregory. You're going to see a lot of Gregory. Every sound echoes. The shuffle of feet, the crackle of the fire, the groan of shifting timber. And it's not like you can just scroll your phone until you get sleepy. Entertainment here is a guy named Bartram who knows 2 whole stories and 1 deeply offensive song. Tonight it's the story about the bishop who got kicked by a cow. Again! And no, there's no electricity, no soft overhead glow, just the flickering candlelight and the occasional orange pulse from the hearth downstairs, which by the way is mostly smoke and not much heat. Sleep comes slowly. Your body aches from the damp chill. The straw pokes through the rough linen. You try to turn over quietly, but fail. Someone groans, someone mutters in Latin, someone is definitely sleep-talking about soup, probably Bartram. You close your eyes and think about your warm modern life, your memory foam mattress, heated blankets, Netflix, indoor bathrooms, toothpaste, socks without holes. And then you remember, this was normal for hundreds of years. For most people, most of the time, this was what life looked like, and now it's your life. At least until you can wake up or escape, or more realistically, adapt. So you nestle deeper into the straw, scratch an itch you'd rather not think about, and whisper goodnight to Gregory the rat. Welcome to castle life. Morning comes, not with a gentle ray of sunshine, but with the jarring clang of a bell and a loud thump as someone opens the shutter and lets in an icy gust of wind that immediately regrets its own existence. Your eyes open to the grey light of dawn, filtering through a slit of a window barely wide enough to fit a pigeon. And yes, there is a pigeon sitting in it judging you. You stretch. Well, try to. Your joints are stiff, your neck has somehow turned into a question mark, and you now know what it feels like to sleep on what's basically a sack of crusty hay. You peel back your itchy wool blanket, careful not to jostle your bunkmates too much. One of them is already awake, grumbling and picking something out of their beard. You suspect it's alive. And your bed? Let's call it early medieval minimalism. A roughly stuffed mattress filled with straw that's mostly flat and a little damp. If you're lucky, there's a scrap of linen covering it, which has been washed, possibly once. The mattress sits directly on a wooden plank or on the floor and beneath it. A chamber pot, because getting up and walking in the cold to the privy, that's for nobles or masochists. You squint toward the corner and there it is, your very own medieval toilet solution. Just a ceramic pot, daring you to use it while 5 other people pretend to be asleep. You pass. Instead you rise and fumble for your clothes, which are exactly where you left them, folded neatly next to the wall, damp from the chill and stiff from yesterday's sweat. The tunic goes over your shift, the hose are laced up slowly, and the shoes are basically stiff leather socks that rub all the wrong places. You're already missing your sneakers. Historians still argue whether people in castles slept fully clothed to preserve warmth or stripped down to their linen for hygiene. But either way, you're currently experiencing the least satisfying part of both theories, cold and smelly. One fun tidbit most schoolbooks skip: some castles had communal straw mattresses, one long shared roll. It's like a sleepover, except the blanket is infested, someone's always snoring, and the guy next to you has scurvy. Once dressed, you fumble toward the hearth, where a thin line of smoke curls up from the rekindled fire. You join the others sitting around it, hands extended, hoping to warm your fingers before they freeze into medieval popsicles. The fire crackles, and a sleepy child sneezes directly onto your shoulder. No one says anything. Someone offers you a piece of hard bread, yesterday's if not older, and a small wooden cup of warm ale. Breakfast. Because tea hasn't made it to your part of Europe yet, coffee is still just a goat-related rumour in Ethiopia. And water? That's for bathing horses. You take a bite of the bread and nearly break a molar, then you sip the ale, lukewarm and slightly sour. It's not that people were drunk all the time, though some certainly were, but ale was safer than water, and easier to stomach than thinking too hard about your life choices. As your stomach grumbles, you try to remember what day it is. Not that it matters. It's not like you're checking your Outlook calendar or planning brunch. Your entire schedule is determined by bells, hunger, and whatever crisis the lord of the castle decides is urgent today. And that leads us to the mattress again. The cursed, scratchy bundle of straw. You glance back at it from across the room. You're already dreading the return. It's lumpy, filled with every uncomfortable texture known to humankind, and somehow manages to smell like old onions, even though onions aren't involved. Mainstream sources often romanticize 4-poster beds and embroidered canopies, but those were for the elite. You're at the bottom of the bedding food chain, where luxury means not waking up with hay in your mouth or a flea in your ear. And speaking of fleas, there's movement near your pillow. You stare, frozen, as a tiny insect hops away into the folds. No one else reacts. You realize this is normal. You're now one with the fleas. Resistance is futile. Across the room, someone starts singing, a low, droning chant about St. Bridget or St. Someone. The acoustics in the room are terrible, but no one complains. It's just noise to fill the freezing silence. You hum along out of politeness. There's no mirror to check your face, but based on how your hair feels, sticky in places, crunchy in others, you know you're not winning any beauty contest today. And even if you were, everyone smells so bad it wouldn't matter. Romance is relative in the 14th century. You make your way toward the main hall, stepping over a dozing dog and nearly bumping into a servant carrying a pile of wet linens. They nod at you but don't smile. No one smiles in the morning. Not in this century. The corridor is narrow and uneven, with low arches designed to keep you permanently hunched. A tapestry flutters as you pass, probably from a hidden draught, though part of you suspects ghosts. they'd fit right in. And then you see it. Another sleeping chamber. Inside, straw bedding is arranged in rows, a few smouldering coals flickering in a brazier. One of the mattresses is propped against the wall to dry. It's stained, misshapen, and looks like it's been through several plagues and one unfortunate livestock accident. A cold realization hits you. The bed you slept in last night might have once been someone else's. Someone who coughed, sneezed, and possibly died in it. Medieval recycling is disturbingly efficient. You stop, take a deep breath of slightly smoky air and accept your fate. You are a castle dweller now, a mattress martyr, a humble soul in a world of splinters, straw, and questionable hygiene. And Gregory the rat. He scampers by again, dragging something that looks suspiciously like a piece of bacon. You make eye contact. He nods. You nod. You're in this together. You stumble through the damp hallway, past more grumbling bodies and clattering feet, when nature calls. Loudly. Breakfast ale tends to go right through you, so you set out on a deeply unpleasant quest to find the castle's so-called toilet. But here's the thing. There are no signs. No WC this way in polite calligraphy. No gently scented lavender soap waiting for you in a stone basin. No. Here in your medieval castle, the toilet is a hole in the wall. Literally. You creep up the spiral staircase, clutching the wall so you don't pitch forward and die on the stone steps. Again, no railing, just vibes. And at the top, behind a wooden door that creaks like it's hiding a skeleton, you find it. The garderobe. It sounds French and fancy, right? It's not. It's a tiny closet jutting out from the castle wall, with a bench and a hole. That's it. The breeze tickling your rear is from the open air. Because that hole goes straight down. Into the moat. Or a pit. Or sometimes just onto the ground below. You try not to think about who might be walking past right now. The seat is wooden, cold enough to fuse you to it if you sit too long, and stained in ways you choose not to investigate. Some people bring herbs to mask the smell. You didn't bring herbs. You're just holding your breath and praying for a quick escape. And you're not alone in here. Tiny spiders watch from the corners. There's a beetle you swear makes eye contact. Insects love garderobes. Warmth, moisture, and a constant supply of material. Historians still argue whether garderobes doubled as clothes storage spaces because the ammonia fumes kept moths away. Which raises the question, how bad did things smell if that was your best moth repellent? You finish your business and shuffle out, bumping into a poor servant carrying a sloshing bucket. You now understand what that bucket is for. Eye contact is avoided. You head back down past the Lord's chambers, where the real privacy exists. The noble family gets their own garderobes, sometimes even indoor ones tucked into tower alcoves. Some are so elaborate they're built with stone chutes or wooden shafts leading to special pits. But you're back to the communal option, the watch your step or you'll fall into the moat option. And speaking of the moat, guess what runs below your humble toilet setup? That's right. A delightful, slow-moving ring of sewage, dead fish, and mysterious objects best left unnamed. You cross a tiny wooden bridge that spans a section of it, and the stench rises like a punch to the nose. The moat was never designed for cleanliness. While it may have started out as a defensive feature, it soon became the all-purpose garbage disposal. Rotten food, dead animals, soiled straw, and yes, waste from your very own garderobe, and that's assuming there's even a moat. Some castles, especially those on hills or dry land, just had cesspits. Massive underground holes that got emptied maybe once a year, by people with shovels. You suddenly have a newfound respect for anyone with pit cleaner in their job title. Today the garderobe is quiet, but during a siege, things get complicated. Waste disposal becomes an afterthought. The smell worsens, rats multiply, disease spreads. There are records of defenders pouring human waste on attackers. Creative? Yes. Hygienic? Deeply? No. You lean on the stone wall, suddenly nostalgic for the innocent simplicity of indoor plumbing. Remember toilet paper? Not an option here. If you're lucky, you get straw, or moss, or old rags. If you're very unlucky, snow. And even worse, none of this is particularly private. Doors don't really lock. Curtains are rare, and sound insulation? Laughable. If you're bashful, you're going to need to get over that. Fast. You return to your shared chamber and pass a scribe scribbling in the corner, nose wrinkled. He's probably writing about you. Or about the latest outbreak of something unpronounceable. Either way, he coughs and says something in Latin that you hope isn't an insult. Castle life means sharing everything. Food, air, space, and bodily functions. Hygiene is mostly conceptual. Baths are rare, washing is minimal. And toilets? They're barely tolerable. You pause beside a wall where an old cracked mural shows a knight slaying a dragon. Bold colours, faded now, still hint at glory. But the real dragons here are in the plumbing, or lack thereof. And no sword will save you from the consequences of 40 people using the same hole in the wall. So what's the alternative? Sometimes, in emergencies, or laziness, people use chamber pots, little ceramic buckets tucked under beds, behind furniture, or wherever there was space. These had to be emptied. By someone. Hopefully not you. Fun historical aside, there's a record of a chamber pot being dumped from a castle window onto a bishop's head. Accident? Debatable. Regrettable. Not really. You sigh, deeply, and lean against the cool stone. Somewhere outside a rooster crows, and somewhere inside someone begins complaining about the porridge again. You're starting to understand them. Because no matter how noble your setting, a castle is just a glorified, uncomfortable stone box with poor sanitation and a rich aroma of human suffering. You shift your weight, your feet aching, and glance longingly at the sky. But you're not going anywhere. Not yet. Gregory the rat appears again, this time munching on what appears to be an old apple core. He's thriving. You offer him a nod of respect. He's seen things. Probably worse than what you've just experienced. Probably. You've used the guardrabe, you've met the moat, you've survived the morning, and you're only on day 1. Your stomach rumbles. Loudly. Not the polite, modern kind of rumble you can silence with a granola bar, but the deep, echoing kind that demands something, anything resembling food. So naturally you follow the scent of something vaguely edible drifting from the kitchens. You're already tempering your expectations. You've heard the legends, castle feasts, banquet tables groaning under roasted game, glazed fruits, and golden goblets of wine. But here's a medieval reality check. That only happens during major festivals or when someone's trying to impress the Pope. Today is just another ordinary castle morning. You're not getting pheasant. You arrive in the great hall where the fires are crackling low and the air smells of smoke, damp wool, and turnips that have seen better days. You find your place at a long wooden trestle table. Splintery, slightly sticky, and covered in crumbs from last night's meal. The kitchen doors creak open. Out comes a harried young servant with a dented pot in one hand and a frown etched deep enough to store rainwater. He ladles out your breakfast, a scoop of thin beige gruel and a hunk of yesterday's bread that could double as a weapon. You stare at it for a moment, as if willing it to become an omelette. It does not. You take a bite. The gruel is lukewarm, lumpy, and tastes faintly of sadness. The bread is hard, but at least it gives your jaw a workout. No butter, no jam, just grain. Very old grain. If you're lucky, there's a bit of ale to wash it down. Not the hearty, rich kind of tavern legends. This is more like soggy bread juice with a hint of fizz. Still safer than water, though. That stream behind the kitchen? You saw a goose in it yesterday. A very sick-looking goose. Historians still argue whether daily ale intake was more about safety or habit. But either way, you're starting your day tipsy or mildly fermented, which honestly might help. A woman sits across from you, gnawing her bread like it owes her money. Better than last week, she mutters. You nod in agreement, though you're not sure why. Last week's breakfast may have included boiled kale and a beetle you chose to ignore. Fun tidbit. Breakfast in the Middle Ages wasn't always standard. Some religious rules viewed it as gluttonous, especially for monks and priests. Eating before morning prayers? Scandalous. But castle life is more practical. You need fuel before your morning bucket splash. More on that later. And this gruel is, technically, fuel. A child nearby dips his bread in the gruel, looks disappointed, then feeds it to the dog. The dog looks disappointed too. You try not to envy the noble family at the high table. Their bread is probably fresher. Their ale might even be spiced. And while you're chewing through a rye brick, they're snacking on preserved fruits or cheeses. Maybe, if they haven't hoarded it in the buttery. But you're not a noble. You're castle middle class, or maybe even bottom class, depending on who's counting. Your breakfast options don't change much throughout the year. Just grains, root vegetables, and maybe a little bacon if someone's pig got unlucky. You scrape the last of your gruel from the bowl. The spoon is wood, worn smooth by dozens of hands. Hygiene isn't top tier. In fact, most bowls and spoons are shared or passed around. Soap exists, technically. It's just expensive. So people use ashes or sand, which means everything you eat probably includes a dash of yesterday's ash. Someone belches loudly nearby. No one reacts. It's practically polite. A cat darts under the table, chasing something that might have once been edible. You pull your feet up instinctively. Last week someone lost a toe to a rat bite. The rats are bold here. Gregory might be plotting. As the meal winds down, servants gather the dishes into large baskets. There's no sink. Washing up means hauling water from the well and scrubbing everything with sand or straw. And if you're on dish duty, congrats! You get to do it in freezing water and probably get yelled at for breaking a bowl older than you. One of the knights at the edge table grumbles about the lack of eggs. You're surprised he expected any. Chickens aren't laying much this time of year, and the castle cook is hoarding eggs for a noblewoman's upcoming confinement. That's how life works here. The top gets the best, and the rest of you fight over beet scraps. And speaking of food hierarchy, dogs get better bones than you do. The Lord's hunting hounds are fed roasted scraps and marrow. You get broth flavoured with the memory of meat, and if there's any real protein, it's probably a pigeon that flew in at the wrong time. Back in the corner, the kitchen boy starts hauling a bucket of scraps outside. He's limping. Probably twisted his ankle on a loose cobblestone or slipped in pig fat. No one offers to help. Injury is just part of the job description. Your belly is not full, but it's quieted, and that's enough. You rub your hands together and brace yourself. The next part of your day is coming fast, and it's just as glamorous as breakfast. You get up from the bench, knees cracking, and stretch. The bread brick has made its presence known in your gut. You're still hungry, still vaguely sticky, and already dreading tomorrow's menu. But that's castle life. Meals are functional, not flavourful. Survival, not satisfaction. You wipe your mouth with your sleeve because napkins are for banquets, and head for the door. Gregory the rat is perched on the threshold. He has half a biscuit in his tiny hands. You stare. He stares back. You nod. He nods. Same struggle, different species. You step outside into the castle courtyard, hoping to clear your head and your sinuses. The sharp morning air smacks your face, mixing wood smoke with the unmistakable scent of damp animal. There's a stables not far from here, and the breeze is doing you no favours. It's bath time. Or, more accurately, it's been 3 weeks since your last splash and people are starting to drop hints. But don't get excited. There's no tub with scented bubbles, no steam rising from gently warm tiles, no stack of soft linen towels. Instead, you're handed a dented copper bucket, a bar of something that might be soap, and a strip of rag for drying off. You trudge toward the washroom, a loose term here, tucked behind the kitchen, where the smoke from the hearth gives the illusion of warmth. Inside, the floor is stone, the walls are damp, and there's a single wooden bench. A servant dumps lukewarm water into your bucket. "Don't waste it," she mutters. You get the impression she says that a lot. You strip quickly, shivering before the bucket even touches you. And then comes the moment of truth. You dip the rag into the water and wring it over your head. It's barely enough to soak your hair, let alone rinse off 3 layers of medieval grime. You rub yourself down with the rag, splashing and scrubbing, but the chill of the room makes it hard to care whether you're clean or just wet. You reach for the soap. It's rough, lye-heavy, and smells faintly of goat. It burns a little. You tell yourself that's just working. Historians still argue whether medieval people really bathed as rarely as the legends say. Some evidence suggests people did wash more than we think, especially in warmer climates or among the merchant classes. But here, in this cold, stony, high-walled castle, hygiene is aspirational, and the bucket bath isn't the worst part. The worst part is knowing that someone else used this same water before you. Water is a precious resource, heated water even more so. So sharing is the norm. You try not to think about whose dirt you're now partially wearing. You rinse as best you can, pat dry with the stiff rag, and shiver as you throw your tunic back over your damp body. There's no blow dryer, no mirror, no refreshing post-shower glow. You just feel slightly less crusty, and very cold. You shuffle back toward the main hall and someone pinches their nose as you pass. "Smells like soap," they whisper. What are you, a priest? One quirky tidbit. During some periods, people believed bathing too often opened the pores to disease. Better to stay sealed in grime, they reasoned, than invite the plague in through a clean armpit. You suddenly understand why so many people wore perfume pouches around their necks. Not for style, for survival. As you walk past the stables, a stable boy tosses a bucket of water over a horse's back. The horse gets a better rinse than you did. Probably warmer water too. You cross the courtyard, where a few people are gathering round the well. Water hauling is a constant chore. There are no pumps, just ropes, heavy buckets, and a lot of spilled effort. You nod at the girl dragging 2 sloshing pails across the mud. She nods back, looking like she's one splinter away from losing it. Inside the castle walls, washing clothing is its own ordeal. Linens are scrubbed on stones, soaked in urine, yes, urine for the ammonia, then rinsed in cold water and hung in the breeze to freeze stiff. Laundry day is also lice inspection day. You decide to pretend your tunic is too dark to show bugs. You pass through a small courtyard where clothes hang limply from a line. A pair of hose flaps in the wind like the saddest flags ever made. A child chases a goose past you. Probably the same goose from the stream. You give it a wide berth. The goose glares. You're not friends. Back in your shared chamber, someone asks, "Did you bathe?" You nod. They sniff. Brave. The rest of your companions are slowly warming up, rubbing their arms and debating whether to take their turn at the bucket. One man scratches at his ribs and mutters about the itch coming back. You scoot slightly away. For the noble class, bathing might involve a wooden tub filled with hot water, servants pouring rose-scented rinses and someone else scrubbing their back. But for you, a bucket and a prayer, and if the lord of the castle needs that bucket for something else, like feeding pigs or cleaning boots, well, your bath gets bumped. You flop back onto your straw bed, hair damp, skin tingling, and consider the irony. You're technically cleaner now, but you feel worse. Every bit of you is chilled, and yet, if you skip the next bath, people will talk. Loudly. Gregory the rat is perched on the ledge again, licking his paw. You could swear he smells better than you. One of your bunkmates coughs wetly. You suddenly realise that even a wash can't protect you from the air itself. Cold, smoky, full of spit particles and burnt fat. Every breath is a gamble, so you curl up under your itchy blanket, still damp from the bath, and close your eyes. For a moment you pretend you're at a spa, a very, very bad spa with no tea, no music, and a strong chance of flea bites. You sigh, then sneeze, then sigh again. Bath day is over. You wake again, if you ever really slept, scratching a spot on your neck that wasn't itchy yesterday. You stretch, and immediately regret it. The damp wool of your tunic sticks to your skin, and the straw mattress has left what feels like a permanent dent in your back. Gregory the rat scurries past your head, dragging a strip of bacon rind like a prize. You can't even be mad. He's got hustle. You rise, bleary-eyed, and blink through the hazy morning light leaking in through the high, narrow window. It's time to get moving. Not for fun, not for exercise, but because if you don't, someone's going to yell at you. Today's duties are the usual medieval trifecta. Fetching, hauling, and suffering. First, water. Always water. You and 3 others are handed empty wooden buckets and pointed toward the well. The walk is short but humiliating. Every slosh, every awkward step through the muddy courtyard is a reminder that plumbing is a distant dream. One guy slips, spills half his bucket, swears quietly, and gets an eye roll from the woman behind him. Again? You trudge back to the great hall, shoulders aching, hands numb. And this is just the start. Next up, wood. Fires don't feed themselves. You and a few other unlucky souls are sent to the woodshed to lug logs back to the kitchen. The air outside is crisp and sharp, the kind of cold that punches through every layer. Your boots squelch in the half-frozen mud. One of them leaks. Of course, by the time you stack your 3rd load, your arms are trembling. Not because you're weak, but because these logs are damp, heavy, and have splinters that aim straight for the soul. Historians still argue whether daily life in a castle was this labour-intensive for all residents, or if it varied drastically based on social role. But there's no debate that most people, especially servants and retainers, worked from dawn until long after dusk. You're now one of them. Welcome. Once the wood's stacked, it's time for animal duty. That's right. Pigs. A few lucky hogs live in a pen tucked under the outer stairwell. It's drafty, loud, and smells like despair. You grab a shovel. It's not for feeding them, it's for what comes after. You scrape, scoop, and haul what can only be described as unprintable muck out to a pit behind the wall. The pit is already suspiciously full. You suspect they only empty it during the full moon or when someone threatens to quit. Fun fact, pigs weren't just waste disposal units, they were living compost machines. Castles used them to eat leftovers, clean up scraps, and provide meat when winter got rough, which means these grunting, snorting, mud-coated friends are technically co-workers. Back in the castle, you get a moment to breathe near the fire, but it's short-lived. Someone hands you a broom made of bound twigs and points at the stairwell. You sweep. The dust rises in clouds, clings to your face, and leaves you coughing like a 14th century chimney. The castle is cold, but also somehow sticky. Grease clings to the stones around the hearth. Soot blackens every beam. The rushes on the floor crunch underfoot, full of crumbs, bones, and occasionally dead insects. New rushes are only laid down every few weeks, on top of the old ones. You try not to think about the layers beneath. You break for a quick meal, some turnip mash with hard cheese and of course more bread. You chew in silence. A dog whines beside you. You give him your crust. He sniffs it, then walks away. Rude. Then it's time to carry more things. Barrels of salted fish, baskets of onions, a vat of curdled milk that may or may not be used for cheese. Every load has a smell and none of them are good. Your back aches, your hands are raw, and there's straw in your boots again. How? You don't even know. One scholarly debate centres on the role of gender in daily castle labour. Some argue women did just as much heavy lifting as men. Others suggest tasks were more segregated. But from your vantage point, hauling slop across the courtyard, while a girl twice your size carries 2 barrels, you're inclined to believe it was whoever's available and not actively vomiting. And vomiting happens more than you'd think. The air grows heavier as the day wears on. Smoke from the kitchen seeps into every corner. A boy scrubbing pots sneezes violently and keeps scrubbing. No one flinches. You cough into your sleeve, try to blink the sting out of your eyes, and consider whether the castle might be trying to kill you. Even the walls seem tired. You pass a spot where water leaks from a crack between the stones. It trickles slowly into a bucket that someone placed there decades ago. No one fixes it. That's just how things are now. And through it all, you're working. There's no break room, no tea time, no casual Fridays. You work until you're told to stop, or until the sun goes down, whichever comes later. By evening, you're hunched, covered in grime, and deeply aware of every single joint in your body. You trudge back to your room and collapse onto your straw mattress. Someone offers you a sip of something strong. You take it. You don't ask what it is. You don't want to know. Gregory the rat is asleep in your boot. You let him stay. He earned it. Tomorrow will be the same. Hauling, cleaning, shoveling, repeating. But for now you lie still, stare up at the rafters, and try to forget that your ceiling is home to 3 spiders and a nest of wasps. Good night. Labourer of stone and straw, you've earned your rest, if not your dignity. It's another day, and this time you don't wake up to the sound of coughing or Gregory the rat chewing in your ear. No, today it's the clamour of metal. Lots of it. A rhythmic clinking and creaking that sounds suspiciously like someone trying to walk while carrying their entire house on their back. You peek out the chamber door and see them. Knights. Or at least men training to be knights. Clad in chunks of armour that clang with every step like overworked wind chimes in a thunderstorm. One poor soul is staggering in a breastplate that's clearly too big, the bottom edge bouncing off his thighs with every other limp. Today, you get to help with armour duty, which sounds prestigious until you realise what that actually means. Polishing, carrying, and maybe, if you're really unlucky, helping someone get into it. There's a room near the armoury where all the gear is stored. Swords, shields, chainmail, helmets, gauntlets, greaves. It smells like iron, sweat, and regret. You're handed a rag and pointed toward a breastplate. Shine it, says the weapons master. With what? You ask. He hands you a lump of something waxy and suspicious. This. And so you scrub. For hours. The armour is dull, scratched, and has mysterious smudges that you try not to identify. Every joint is a trap for grime. Every hinge pinches your fingers if you're not careful. You develop a rhythm. Scrub, polish, blow on your hands, repeat. Historians still argue whether the full suits of armour were worn as frequently as movies suggest. In reality, most days required lighter gear, padded gambesons, mail shirts, maybe a helmet if things looked dicey. But today the Lord's men are preparing for a tournament, and that means full plate. Heavy, hot, and incredibly uncooperative. Eventually a knight in training grabs you for help. "Strap this on," he says, indicating the vambrace on his arm. You do your best, wrapping leather straps and cinching buckles until your fingers go numb. He grunts in approval, then lifts his arm and the whole thing sags dangerously to one side. Too loose. You try again. One quirky tidbit. It could take up to an hour to fully armour a knight, and he often needed the help of 2 or more squires. You're one person, and not especially tall. You do your best. You're now intimately familiar with the armpits of medieval nobility. It's not a place you wanted to be, but here we are. Once the knight is suited up, he walks like a very anxious refrigerator. Every step is deliberate, every stare a gamble. You trail behind him, just in case he tips over, which he nearly does. Twice. Outside in the training yard, the others are already swinging swords and bashing shields in the name of practice. You watch from the sidelines, still catching your breath, when someone shouts, "Get the helmets!" You jog back inside and return with an armload of metal bowls that weigh more than they look. You're now the castle's designated walking hanger rack. Then comes the fun part, watching someone try to fight while dressed like a tin can. One guy gets stuck trying to raise his sword. Another falls and can't get up without 2 people hoisting him. A third swats his opponent and yells in triumph, only to get bonked from behind because his helmet limited his vision to the medieval equivalent of a cardboard tube. Armour is incredible technology for its time, but it's not made for comfort. It chafes, pinches, and turns sweat into a full-body marinade. Underneath, knights wear padded doublets soaked in their own effort. By the end of a single hour, the training yard smells like an ironmonger's armpit. You sit down to rest, but a trainer barks at you to start dragging the practice dummies back into storage. They're heavy, awkward, and suspiciously sticky. You drag them one by one, mentally calculating how much iron it would take to sink to the bottom of the moat. Purely hypothetical, of course. One scholarly debate focuses on whether armour actually made knights invulnerable. Some say yes, especially against swords. Others point out that maces, axe, and longbows had a pretty good track record of ruining someone's day, regardless of how shiny they looked. You reflect on this as you pass the arrow practice range, where archers are lining up to test their aim. One arrow thuds into a straw target. Another goes wide and hits a wooden beam near your head. No one seems too concerned. The day drags on, more polishing, more carrying. You're now intimately familiar with the inside of a helmet, where sweat pools and the smell is somewhere between wet dog and forgotten soup. A squire shows you how to stuff cloth in the cheek flaps to keep them from rubbing. "Don't let 'em bite your ears," he says, with the air of someone who's lost a few chunks. You don't get to wear armour yourself, unless someone really needs a dummy. But you try on a gauntlet when no one's looking. It's heavier than it seems, lined with leather, and surprisingly stiff. You flex your fingers and instantly understand how impossible it must be to do anything delicate while wearing this. Typing? Out of the question. Even picking your nose would be an ordeal. Eventually the practice winds down. The knights disassemble themselves with help. Pieces thudding to the ground, chainmail hissing like metal snakes. Everything gets hauled back to storage. By you, of course. You stack greaves and breastplates like they're just clunky jigsaw puzzles, your arms aching with every trip. Gregory the rat scurries by, dragging a scrap of chainmail. You gently take it from him. He hisses. You back off. He's earned his armour. Back in your chamber, you collapse onto the straw and roll onto your sore side. A piece of hay stabs you in the hip. You don't even care. You just lie there, muscles twitching, sweat drying cold on your back. You've learned something today. Armour protects your body. But only if you survive the process of putting it on. You wake the next morning to an all-too-familiar chill, but today it's not your aching arms or a poorly timed sneeze that greets you. No, it's the smell. A deep, pungent, unmistakable smell wafting up from the floorboards. Welcome to castle life, where the pigs live just beneath your feet. You groggily stand, brush straw from your hair, and glance at your boots with suspicion. Last night, you heard something sloshing near them. You shake them out, find a beetle, and try not to scream. Then you shuffle down the uneven stairs toward your workplace. which is inconveniently also your home. Living and working in a castle isn't like clocking into a shift at some medieval equivalent of Starbucks. No, your life is a constant blend of labour and low-level suffering. There's no separation of space. You sleep in the same building where you haul firewood, slaughter chickens, and mop up after the drunken nobleman who mistook the pantry for the privy. Again. You pass through the main hall, stepping around a sleeping dog and a toppled bucket of grain, and make your way to the lower level. This is where things get really medieval. Literally. Down here, just under the main living quarters, are the livestock pens. Pigs mostly, but sometimes goats or even the occasional cow. They don't get their own barn. Instead, they get a section of the castle, and by extension so do you. The walls are thick, damp, and streaked with generations of unidentifiable splatter. The smell is complex. You grab a shovel and join the others scooping out straw soaked through with mud, droppings, and things better left unnamed. Every lift of the shovel is a small act of courage. One poor soul lets out a string of quiet curses as he finds a rat nest in the corner. Not Gregory's family, thankfully, but possibly cousins. Historians still debate whether animals were always kept inside castles like this, or whether it was more common during winter or in times of siege. Regardless, you're living in the version where pigs are roommates and goats occasionally eat your laundry. And it's not just the smell or the filth, it's the noise. Pigs squeal, constantly. Chickens cluck and flap and peck each other like feathered drama queens. Even the goats whine in a way that sounds disturbingly human at times. You try to focus on the rhythm of shoveling. That helps. After the pens are mucked, you haul fresh straw from the cart outside. It's not light. You struggle to lift it up the stairs, breathing through your mouth and regretting last night's gruel. A man nearby sneezes directly into the straw bale. You make a mental note to avoid that section later. You dump the straw in the pen and spread it out, grateful for even the illusion of cleanliness. The pigs roll happily in it, oblivious to your efforts. You give one a gentle nudge. It snorts and flops onto your boot. You decide you'll never eat pork again. Or at least not this pig. He has a name now. It's Reginald. Back in the kitchen area, someone's cleaning a cauldron with what appears to be sand and a torn apron. There are still bits of yesterday's stew clinging to the sides. Probably turnip and bone. You don't ask. You're sent to fetch more firewood. Outside, the world is coated in a thin layer of frost. The ground crunches under your feet. Your hands, already raw, go numb instantly. You grab the logs and return inside, where the transition from freezing air to smoke. Thick warmth hits like a wet blanket. Castle interiors aren't cosy. They're smoky, drafty, and crowded. You move through corridors where people are constantly in the way. Someone's sharpening a blade on the stairs. Someone else is fixing a broken cartwheel in the hallway. You dodge, duck, and sidestep your way to the hearth and dump the wood, coughing as you straighten up. A boy is mopping the flagstones with water that looks more like soup. It's brown. He's clearly given up hope. Fun tidbit. Castles were designed more for defence than for comfort, which means most rooms are narrow, windowless, and multi-purpose. You eat where you sleep, you cook where you bathe, you work where you try to rest. Your next task, scrubbing rushes. That's right. The floor carpet made from strewn reeds, herbs and straw. Over time it becomes a biological timeline of castle life. Food scraps, spilled ale, bones, feathers, ash, even bits of hair. You sweep it out with a broad wooden rake, feeling every thud as you drag centuries of grime toward the door. Outside you dump it into a compost pile that's steaming ominously. You briefly consider throwing yourself in with it, but then you remember dinner is coming. You trudge to the water trough, splash your face, freezing always, and wipe your hands on your tunic. Not clean, just less crusty. Someone nearby is laughing about a chambermaid who tried to use ashes to wash her hair. Looked like a chimney ghost, he says. You chuckle, then realise your own hair hasn't seen water in days. You tug your hood tighter. You pause for a moment and lean against the cold stone. You hear the clang of the blacksmith, the sizzle of fat from the kitchen, the soft bleating of goats, and the squeal of pigs settling into clean straw. It's not peaceful, but it's familiar. Scholars often note that castle life blurred all the boundaries, between inside and outside, between work and home, between person and animal. You're living proof. Today alone you've cleaned, carried, cooked and contended with 3 separate species. 4, if you count Gregory. You're not just surviving the medieval castle, you're becoming part of its rhythm. a cog in its creaking, smoking, snorting machine. You return to your chamber just as someone lights a candle with a slow, exaggerated sigh. The room glows a little, shadows dancing on the cracked walls. You flop down on your straw mattress, boots still on. You don't have the energy to remove them. Gregory curls up beside you. He smells like hay. You don't mind. You're starting to smell like hay too. Your eyes flutter open to the flicker of firelight and the low rumble of voices. It's dinner time. Or, as it's known here in the castle, let's all pretend this is edible. You make your way to the great hall where long wooden tables groan under the weight of expectation more than food. There's no silverware laid out neatly, no flickering chandeliers dripping candle wax in cinematic fashion. Just trenchers, stale slabs of bread used as makeshift plates, and the usual medieval optimism that whatever you're about to eat won't crawl away mid-bite. You take your seat, more like your allotted space on a shared bench, and wait. The air smells faintly of burnt onion and something gamey, like a duck that gave up halfway through roasting. Everyone's bundled up. The fireplace roars in theory, but most of the heat stays right where it is, near the noble table, where your betters are already sipping wine and sampling cheeses. You stare, they don't look back. The food arrives in waves. First, stew. Always stew. It sloshes from the pot into your wooden bowl, thick with root vegetables and something meat-adjacent. You prod a floating chunk with your spoon. Yes, you bring your own, lose it, and you eat with your fingers, trying to determine whether it once had feathers or hooves. The bread trencher soaks up the juices but also crumbles at the edges. It's several days old, as confirmed by the slight green fuzz developing on one corner. You discreetly tear that part off. Gregory the rat might appreciate it later. You taste the stew. It's hot, barely, and salty, with notes of boiled sadness. Somewhere in the bowl there's a bone. Possibly chicken, possibly squirrel, possibly not a bone at all. You keep chewing and decide not to ask questions. Historians agree that castle diets were heavily dependent on the season. In the dead of winter, people relied on whatever was preserved. Salted meat, pickled vegetables, smoked fish, and hard cheese. Which means that tonight's dinner is probably a beautiful medley of last month's desperation. As you eat, you hear the familiar crack of stale bread across the table. A woman breaks her trencher in half and uses it to scoop her stew. It disintegrates halfway to her mouth. She shrugs and licks her fingers. It's not gross, it's just efficient. Wine is rare for folks like you. Ale is more common, but tonight the ale is thin and vaguely sour. You drink anyway. Hydration is hydration. There's a sudden clang at the noble table. Someone dropped a goblet. Everyone glances, but no one rushes to help. A servant scoops it up, refills it without a word, and retreats. Behind him, the lord of the castle raises a toast. "To St. Hubert," he bellows, "protector of hunters and loyal dogs." Everyone cheers, even the people who clearly have no idea who St. Hubert is. One quirky historical tidbit. Some medieval feasts involved entire animals brought out whole, like peacocks dressed in their own feathers or pies filled with live birds. But for everyday castle folk, the drama is mostly in guessing what you're chewing. You scrape the last of your stew into your mouth, then eye the hard cheese being passed around. It's crumbly, tangy, and smells like it has opinions. You break off a chunk and feel your molars protest. You chew anyway. At least it's protein. A bard begins to play a lute in the corner. The tune is meandering and slow, more for ambience than enjoyment. His singing is half-hearted, probably because he hasn't been paid in 3 weeks and had to pawn half his strings. He croons something about a noble maiden and a river eel. You try to listen, then stop trying. At the far end of the table, a man pulls out a roasted onion and passes it to his left. Communal eating is the norm, and no one's big on boundaries. You politely decline a shared spoonful of something jiggly and grey. You have your limits. There's a scraping of chairs as the nobles rise. The rest of you follow suit, half from respect, half from stiffness. Bowls are gathered. The trenchers, what's left of them, are tossed into a slop bucket for the pigs. You spot Reginald the pig waiting patiently outside the kitchen door. His timing is excellent. The hall begins to clear. Some people linger, playing dice on the floor. Others lean near the fire, holding their hands out to catch the warmth. A boy accidentally steps on someone's foot. An argument brews, then fades with a grunt and a muttered insult. You make your way back toward your sleeping chamber, but not before passing through the kitchen. It's chaos. Cooks scrape pans, sweep up bits of bone and onion skin, and argue about tomorrow's meal. One of them is desperately trying to identify the source of a terrible smell. Spoiler, it's the fish barrel. Scholars still debate how often meat actually appeared on the plates of castle servants. Some argue it was rare, reserved for feast days. Others suggest hunting supplemented the protein supply more than we realise. You're pretty sure that chunk in your stew was once alive, but what it was, still a mystery. As you reach your straw pile for the night, you sit slowly, already feeling the heaviness of the day settle into your spine. You scratch at the back of your neck. Flea bite, mosquito. You'll know by morning. Gregory climbs into your boot, dragging a crumb of cheese with him. You nod respectfully. Dinner is done. You're not full exactly, but not starving either. In this world, that's a win. The hall quiets, the fire dims, you lie back and let the wooden spoon roll from your hand. There's stew in your hair, smoke in your clothes, and cheese between your teeth. Sleep calls. You ignore the cramp in your side, close your eyes and try not to dream of squirrel stew. You sleep, sort of, at least until the guy next to you starts snoring like a drowning ox. You shift, stuff some of your cloak against one ear, and close your eyes again. But it's no use. The castle isn't quiet. It never is. Castle nights are a special kind of restless. The stones creak. The wind whistles through gaps in the shutters. Rats scurry in the rafters. Someone upstairs rolls over and knocks something off a shelf. It hits the floor with a crack and nobody checks, because at this point, everyone's too tired to care unless it's on fire. The temperature dips just enough to make you wish you hadn't given your blanket to that shivering boy earlier. Your tunic is still vaguely damp from the earlier bath, and you're beginning to feel every draught like a whisper of betrayal. You tug your hood lower and curl into a tight ball. Your hip finds a rock under the straw. Of course. Historians still argue whether castle interiors were truly freezing or just unpleasant. The answer depends on which room you're in. The Great Hall? Warmish? The pantry? A tundra? Your shared sleeping chamber? Somewhere between brisk and medieval meat locker. And it's not just the cold, it's the noise. Always the noise. Outside your room, someone's pacing. You hear their boots on stone. Slow, steady, relentless. A guard, maybe, or a lord with indigestion. Either way, it's a reminder that even at night the castle breathes. The fire in the hearth has mostly died down now, just embers crackling faintly, casting weird shadows on the walls. You try to count the stones in the ceiling, hoping the monotony will drag you under. It doesn't. You get to 23 before the dog across the room starts scratching himself loudly, and then vomits something deeply mysterious onto the rushes. You sigh. Sleep here isn't restful, it's a negotiation. You might drift off for a while, only to be awakened by someone rolling over, snorting or muttering in their sleep. One man, 2 bunks down, seems to be reenacting an entire sermon in Latin while dreaming. Another giggles once, sharply, then falls silent. You stare at the wall. Gregory the rat rustles softly in your boot, snoring in his own way, a delicate little chitter like crumpling parchment. From the hall, a cold gust blows in. You hear the shutter rattle, and a low moan echo through the corridor. It might be the wind, it might not. You're not investigating. One fun and slightly eerie fact. Many castles were built with murder holes and hidden passages. You try not to think about that as you spot a suspiciously square patch of wall that's a different shade from the rest. A door, a panel, a portal to a darker draught. You pull your blanket tighter and look away. Downstairs, the pigs grunt in their sleep. A deep rhythmic chorus like snoring with hooves. The goat bleats once, sharply, as if having a nightmare. Someone in the next room coughs wetly and then disturbingly doesn't cough again. Midnight passes, or what feels like midnight. There's no clock. Just the slow, gradual dimming of the moonlight outside your window slit and the rising certainty that your back will never be the same again. You roll onto your other side, regretting it instantly. Your shoulder hits something lumpy in the straw, probably a stick, hopefully. You consider getting up, maybe walking around the castle to ease the insomnia, but then you remember how cold the floor is, how echoing your steps would be, and the fact that the last time someone wandered at night, they ended up locked in a closet until morning. You stay put. Scholars often ask how people handle the long winter nights in castles. There are theories. storytelling, prayer, restless pacing, or good old-fashioned staring into the void. Tonight, you're going with the latter. A light flickers in the hall, just for a second, then gone. No footsteps follow, no door opens, just darkness again. You pretend you didn't see it. You start counting backward from 100. You lose count at 83 when something thuds above you. You don't look up. There's a sound like a dragging chain, but you tell yourself it's just Bartram snoring into his collar. The silence returns slowly, like fog curling through the stones. People finally settle. The wind eases. The coals die into faint pulsing orange dots. You finally close your eyes again, just for a moment. And then, the rooster crows. Not just once, but 3 times. Loudly, proudly, at least an hour too early. You groan. Someone curses in the next bunk. Someone else throws a shoe. It hits the wall and drops with a pathetic thud. You sit up. The air is colder than before. Your blanket has migrated halfway across the floor. Gregory is gone, probably preparing his own breakfast. You stretch, back cracking like old wood, and try to summon the strength to stand. You don't want to. You're not ready. But the castle doesn't care. Dawn is coming. Another day is coming. And with it, chores, hunger, noise, and the ever-present scent of pig. You rise. You shuffle to the courtyard, boots squelching faintly from last night's frost turning to slush. The sun hasn't quite risen, but the castle is already alive in that chaotic, resigned way it always is. Someone's shouting about onions. Someone else is chasing a goose with a ladle. You step around a pile of laundry, a puddle of questionable origin, and then, there it is, the moat. You pause. It's the one romantic part of the castle you were actually excited to see. Moats in paintings always look so intentional, grand, serene. You were expecting shimmering water, graceful ducks, maybe a couple of lily pads. But instead, you're hit by a smell that nearly knocks you back through the door you just came out of. The moat is a wide, greenish-brown ring of slow, stagnant water that encircles the stone walls like a slimy necklace. It burps occasionally. A frog croaks. Something under the surface slithers. You don't ask what it is. Here's the thing they don't tell you in fairy tales. Most moats were not crystal-clear ponds of swan-like elegance. They were defensive trash zones. A wet, muddy, disease-riddled barrier designed more to disgust than to dazzle. Historians agree moats were multifunctional. They slowed down enemies, sure, but they also served as medieval garbage disposals. Food scraps, spoiled meat, chamber pot contents, all of it got chucked into the moat. Out of sight, out of nostril. You step closer and lean over the edge. The water ripples thickly. There's a fish in there. Maybe, or it might be a boot. The line between flora, fauna, and lost possessions is blurry. One of the castle guards approaches. "Lovely, innit?" he says, gesturing with his spear. You nod weakly, trying not to breathe too deeply. He tosses a small sack into the water. It floats for a second, then slowly sinks. You decide not to ask what was in it. A child runs past you and stops just before the edge. He peers down, then yells, "I see a face!" You don't look. You definitely don't look. And here's the twist. During a siege, the moat becomes even worse. When the castle is under attack, waste disposal stops, food becomes scarce, and the moat becomes an actual biohazard. There's historical evidence of besieged defenders throwing corpses, animal and human, into the moat to avoid disease inside. Ironically, it just moves the problem a few feet outward. One quirky fact: some moats weren't even wet. Dry moats were common in rocky or elevated areas. Just a big trench, still effective, still gross, still a terrible place to drop your lunch. You try to imagine being an attacking soldier, armour creaking, trying to cross this mess while arrows rain down and boiling oil threatens your face. Then you remember you're not an attacker, you're inside, which means the moat smell is your problem all day, every day. You circle part of it, trying to avoid the deeper muck. Near the southern wall there's a wooden bridge, drawn up during the night, now being lowered by a groaning winch. It slams down with a jarring thunk. You watch as it creaks into place, patches of moss and dried slime flaking off the planks. A goat promptly trots across like it owns the place. You follow it, just to say you crossed the moat. On the far side, there's a small outbuilding, Maybe once a guard shack, now clearly a storage spot for barrels and despair. The air here is no fresher. In fact, it smells faintly of mould and cabbage. You find a bench and sit for a moment. The bench wobbles. You accept it. Everything wobbles in this century. From here, you can see the full perimeter of the castle wall. The moat encircles it in a wide loop, deceptively shallow in some areas, suspiciously deep in others. Patches of green slime cling to the surface, stirred only by lazy ripples and the occasional duck. The duck looks haunted. Scholars still argue whether castle residents understood how bad moat water really was. Some evidence suggests they knew it was foul but didn't quite connect it to disease. Others believe they thought of the stink as part of the natural world, like thunder or annoying in-laws. You begin to wonder how many things you've drunk, bathed in, or stepped through that may have come from, or ended up in, this very moat. Back inside the castle, you pass the kitchen and see a cook rinsing vegetables in a basin. Not moat water, she says, preemptively. You nod, she squints. Probably. You take comfort where you can. Someone calls for help lifting a barrel. It's half rotted, wet at the bottom, and smells like old onions in despair. You help anyway. Because that's what living here is. Helping with things you don't understand, lifting things that smell bad, and being grateful when none of it ends up on your tunic. By now the sun is higher. The wind picks up, carrying the scent of the moat directly through the arrow slits. You see someone upstairs light a stick of dried lavender. Smart. It doesn't help much. You head back to your chamber, brushing mud from your boots. Gregory's perched on your straw pile, nibbling something green. You freeze. "Gregory," you whisper, "did you go in the moat?" He pauses, wipes his whiskers, and goes back to eating. You decide not to ask. You're back in the great hall, staring into a bucket of limp vegetables and trying to remember what peace felt like. But the bell tolls, deep, slow, echoing through every stone in the castle. 3 chimes. Siege drill. At least, you hope it's a drill. People start moving. Fast. The outer gates clatter closed. Guards scramble to battlements. Someone yells for a cook to bring up every sack of grain from the cellar. Your pulse kicks up. Not because you think you'll be fighting, but because you know you'll be hauling. Castle sieges are long, hungry, and exceptionally boring. No dramatic last stands every morning. No flaming arrows each afternoon. Most of the time, it's just sitting, waiting, and pretending that boiled turnip water is a meal. You follow a group of servants down into the storage cellar, which smells like mildew and old carrots. Crates are stacked high, sacks of barley piled next to barrels of dried peas. Don't drop anything, someone warns, as you're handed a sack that outweighs your ambitions. Up and down, trip after trip. Grain, salt, hard cheese, dried meat, precious, hoarded, and mostly mouldy. You set them in a corner of the great hall where they'll stay under watch. Anything edible is now gold. Above, the gates are sealed. The drawbridge is up. The moat glistens with its usual threatening burble. Outside, enemies might be setting up camp, sharpening weapons, building siege towers, or they might just be watching, waiting, seeing how long you'll last. You're not a soldier, you're not even a squire. You're a warm body with an aching back. And during a siege, that means one thing: doing every thankless job that's too dangerous for nobility and too disgusting for anyone else. First up, rationing. Dinner becomes an event. A sad, smaller, thinner event. The same turnip stew, but less of it. Bread slices are now measured. Cheese? Only for those on kitchen duty or possessing scandalous amounts of charm. Historians still argue how long castles could withstand sieges without external help. Some accounts boast of months, even years, but those numbers often ignore the human side, the coughs that get wetter, the stomachs that shrink, the morale that slips with every passing identical meal. You sit by the fire, which is now reduced to embers. Wood is being rationed too. You're wearing every tunic you own. You smell like smoke, onions, and fear. Then come the rumours. They have trebuchets. They've poisoned the stream. They bribed one of the guards. You try not to listen. Gregory the rat seems unbothered, but he's also currently trying to drag a hunk of dried fish into a crack in the floorboards. Day 2. The bell rings again. This time someone's injured. A guard slipped near the battlements and dislocated his shoulder. You're handed a pail of vinegar and some dirty cloth and told to assist. You're not trained. The man screams. A lot. You pat his hand awkwardly. One quirky tidbit. Siege warfare involved psychological tactics. Noise at night. Trumpets blaring at dawn. Messages on arrows. Sometimes enemies sent dead animals, or more often, live ones, diseased and furious, over the walls. Castle residents learn to burn bodies quickly. You volunteer for fire duty with a little too much enthusiasm. On day 4, food is tighter. Your belly groans louder than the moat. Everyone smells worse. Bathing? Out of the question. Water's for drinking now. You try to scrape the grime off your arms with straw. It doesn't help. A group of men is assigned to reinforce the inner gate. You carry stone. Your legs tremble on the stairs. Someone faints. No one has time to help. At night, the sounds from outside grow louder. Hammering, chanting, a distant scream, or maybe just a fox. No one's sure anymore. Inside, a priest begins leading extra prayers. Some listen, others curse. You do both. You dream of bread. Not even good bread, just warm bread. Not scraped for mould, not split into quarters, just a whole piece, with crust and everything. By day 7, you stop counting. Sleep becomes brief and jagged. Your bed feels harder. The straw is flattened. Gregory is now sleeping directly on your chest. You let him. Then, suddenly, it's quiet. Too quiet. Everyone gathers in the main hall listening. The Lord appears, pale and proud, announcing that the attackers have retreated. They lost interest, he claims. Or maybe someone paid them. Or someone inside did. No one asks. The drawbridge lowers. The gates creak open. Sunlight pours in like a foreign language. You step out, blinking, stunned. Birds chirp. The world continues. The siege is over. You're alive. You're cold, hungry, and deeply uncomfortable. But you're alive. You sit by the moat, watching it bubble faintly and exhale. A single breath you hadn't realized you were holding. Gregory sits beside you, licking his whiskers. You both deserve this moment. The siege may be over, but don't think you're getting a moment of peace. No, tonight is feast night, a celebration of not dying. The hall is being decorated with whatever's left. A few faded banners, some pine branches from the woods, and someone even managed to wrestle together a centerpiece of cabbages and 3 sad apples. It's rustic, it's bleak, it's a party. You help move benches, spread rough-woven cloths over the long tables, and try not to get splinters in your palms. Everyone's pretending to be in good spirits, but mostly you all just want real food and a chance to sit down without also freezing. A fire roars at the far end of the hall. That's new. It's the first real blaze you've seen since before the siege. People cluster around it, hands outstretched, cloaks steaming faintly from dampness. You hover nearby just long enough to toast your fingers before being shoved away by a man carrying a wheel of cheese like it's the crown jewels. And then the cooks arrive, trays of food, carried shoulder high, like treasure. You don't want to get your hopes up. You tell yourself it'll just be turnip stew again. But then you smell it. Meat. Real, actual, roasted meat. You edge forward, staring at the sizzling golden brown skin of what turns out to be swan? Maybe goose. It's hard to tell, but it smells like heaven. People crowd around, jostling for space, and a few sharp elbows get thrown. You get a slice. Just one. It's smaller than you'd like, but it's meat. Juicy, tender, and even seasoned. Salt. Herbs. Someone put effort into this. The bread is fresh. Or fresher. You can still bend it without it snapping in half, and there are even a few dates tucked into a bowl on the side. Exotic. Expensive. Probably snuck in through some back channel while everyone else was busy sharpening pitchforks. Historians have long noted the stark difference between everyday fare and feast days in the medieval world. During regular days, you might survive on pottage and stale grains, but feasts? They went all out, at least for the upper crust. Roasts, pies, candied fruits, wines, even illusion food made to look like swans in armour, or fish swimming in aspic. Tonight isn't that dramatic, but compared to your usual, it's like a royal banquet. You settle at a table near the centre of the room and chew slowly, savouring every bite. The noise in the hall builds. Laughter, the clinking of cups, the scraping of spoons against bowls. People are smiling again. Even the surly guard from the gate is telling a story about the time he accidentally locked himself in the latrine. The punchline makes half the table snort ale. And then, of course, come the performances. A bard stands on a low platform near the hearth, tuning his lute with the haunted look of a man who's been paid in leftover onions. Still, he starts playing. a sprightly tune, something vaguely romantic and suspiciously off-key. You glance to the noble table, where the lord and lady of the castle are reclined, goblets in hand, nodding along. They're dressed in their best. Fur-lined cloaks, embroidered cuffs, rings gleaming in the firelight. They look warm. You do not. You take another bite of bread and focus on not inhaling it in 3 seconds. Then the jester arrives. He bursts through a side door wearing a ragged red and yellow outfit with bells sewn into the edges. His makeup is smeared, his grin a little too wide, and his energy far too high for someone who's likely been sleeping in a storage room. He flips, literally, lands in a heap, scrambles up, and begins juggling cabbages. The room loves it. The nobles laugh. The children scream in delight. One of the cabbages rolls into the fire. No one minds. You laugh too, but more carefully, because you've heard stories. If the jester doesn't make the lord laugh, he doesn't eat, sometimes worse. One quirky tidbit: jesters weren't always fools. Some were clever, witty entertainers with the rare license to poke fun at nobility. Others were closer to court pets, mocked as often as they mocked others. Either way, their position was precarious. One bad joke and they could go from juggling to, well, not juggling. Tonight, the jester kills. He dances, sings, flings turnips, even impersonates the castle priest, who thankfully is too drunk to notice. It's a good night. For him, as the feast winds down, the mood softens. People lean on each other, some nap with heads on the table. The fire pops and hisses. The bard has moved on to a sleepy ballad. The jester sits in the corner now, munching a chicken bone with one boot off, and an exhausted look in his eyes. You glance toward the pig's corner and catch a glimpse of Reginald, asleep under a bench. He must have snuck in. No one stops him. It's feast night. You feel full. Genuinely full. It's a rare sensation. You stretch your legs under the table, nearly kick someone. They grunt but don't move. The hall grows quieter. The fire dims. Someone snores gently near the hearth. You let your head fall forward and rest your chin on your folded arms. It's not a bed, but it's warm, and for now, that's enough. Gregory the rat sneaks up onto your shoulder and curls under your collar. You barely notice. Outside, the wind moans softly through the slits in the stone. Inside, the castle sighs with sleep and leftover laughter. Feast nights don't happen often, but when they do, even a castle, cold, loud, grimy castle, feels like home. Morning stirs slower after a feast night, and so do you. Your back aches, your neck has a mysterious crick, and your breath smells like stale onions and survival. You blink away the stiffness in your eyes, grope blindly for your boots, and try to rise without stepping on Gregory, who is, predictably, sprawled across your sleeve like he owns the place. Today, you're reminded of your true station in life. You have a job, a specific one, not hauling wood, not helping with pigs. No, this time, you're reassigned to one of the most humbling positions in the medieval job lottery, Castle Scullion. A scullion, for those lucky enough not to know, is the lowest of the low in the kitchen hierarchy. You don't cook, you don't stir, you don't even chop. You scrape, you scrub, you clean pans so greasy they could start fires, and your tools, water, ashes, and a rag that smells like it once had dreams. You report to the kitchen, rubbing your eyes. The cook greets you with a grunt and a blackened pot the size of a bathtub. "That's from last night's goose," she mutters. "Or was it swan? Doesn't matter. Get scrubbing." And so it begins. First, you lug the pot to the wash area, a stone basin filled with water so cold it threatens to crack your fingers. You dump in a handful of ashes, the medieval version of detergent, and grab your wire brush. Within minutes, your sleeves are soaked, your hands are red, and you're covered in flecks of unidentifiable grease. Scrubbing takes forever. The soot from the fire is caked on like volcanic rock. You try different angles, different pressure, even a prayer. It doesn't help. You scrape until your arms go numb. Historians believe scullions often started young, children or teens too small for field labour and too unconnected for apprenticeships. They worked before sunrise and collapsed after dark. If you were lucky, you got promoted to kitchen boy. If not, you just aged into a sore-backed shadow of yourself. Midway through your third pot, the cook barks for you to see to the spit. You don't ask what that means, you just obey. The spit is a long iron rod stuck through an unfortunate animal, today a hare, and slowly rotated over the fire. Except you're the rotation system. That's right, you squat beside the flames and turn the crank over and over, making sure the meat cooks evenly. It's hot, it's smoky, it's dizzying. You cough, the hair spins, you cough again. By the time it's done, you're coated in sweat, smoke, and fat droplets that dripped off the roast and landed with uncanny precision on your face. Then comes the floor. Castle kitchens don't have drains, they have straw, and the straw has absorbed centuries of spills. Your job, rake it up, carry it out, and replace it. But first, you have to pick out the bones, and bits of bread, and 3 broken spoons, and 1 whole turnip that looks salvageable. The bucket you use to carry the used straw leaks. Of course it does. You plug the gap with a rag and keep going. You pass a boy carrying a tray of bread and he nods at you. You're the new pot scrubber? You nod. Good luck. He vanishes into the pantry like a ghost of meals future. And if you think you get a break, nope. Between rounds of scrubbing, you're told to carry water from the well, fetch herbs from the kitchen garden, chase a goose out of the pantry again, and stir the porridge, but not too fast or it burns. One quirky tidbit. Kitchen fires were so common in medieval castles that some cooks kept buckets of sand nearby instead of water. Water plus grease. Disaster. You learn this the hard way when someone drops a ladle into a boiling pot and sends steam billowing across the room. Someone yells, someone else slips. You sigh. It's not glamorous work, but it's essential. No cook can do their job without a dozen invisible hands keeping the gears turning. That's you. The gear turner, the unsung hero of undercooked meat and soot removal. Later in the day, you're sent to clean out the pantry shelves. You find sacks of flour half-eaten by mice, wheels of cheese that have gone blue in ways they shouldn't, and a mysterious jar of something moving. You do what any medieval realist would do, put it back and pretend you saw nothing. The sun starts to set as you carry the last pot outside to scrub under the rain barrel. The cold water stings, but it's quiet out here. Peaceful. You hear the distant clatter of hooves, the low murmur of evening prayers, and the occasional indignant squeal of Reginald the pig defending a turnip. You finish your last task just as the bell chimes for supper. You're not even hungry. You're too tired, too smoked, too splattered. Someone hands you a heel of bread and a cup of ale. You sit near the kitchen door and eat slowly, watching the steam from your cup spiral into the cool air. Scholars sometimes debate whether life in a castle was hard or simply different. You're not sure, but your feet hurt, your fingers are raw, and your tunic smells like roasted hare. Gregory returns as always, settling on your boot with an exhausted sigh. You pat his back gently. He twitches once, then sleeps. So do you. Slumped against the kitchen wall, bread in hand, breathing smoke and silence. You wake with your cheek stuck to a greasy bit of wood and your mouth tasting faintly of old onion. The sky outside is just beginning to pale, casting a thin grey light across the slop-stained stones near the kitchen door. Your back protests. Your hands are stiff. Gregory is still snoozing on your boot like nothing's wrong with the world. Today is medicine day. You didn't ask for it. You didn't volunteer. But someone sneezed on the Lord's soup yesterday, and now the household physician, if you can call him that, is demanding help. You are that help. You're ushered into a cramped chamber near the chapel where the air smells like dried herbs, sweat, and something faintly iron. The physician is a wiry man with permanent frown lines and a look in his eyes that suggests he'd rather be dissecting a frog than speaking to you. On the table beside him sits an array of tools, shears, tweezers, pots of mystery powder, and a truly intimidating quantity of leeches in a clay jar. You eye the jar eyes you back. Your first task is to fetch more herbs from the apothecary garden. Out back, in the shadow of the curtain wall, lies a tangle of greenery that someone once tried to organise. Lavender, thyme, sage, mint, and a suspicious vine the physician only calls the sleepy one. You pick what you're told, careful not to confuse parsley with hemlock again. That lesson was unpleasant. You return with the bundle and start preparing a poultice. Mash it, the physician mutters. Add honey. Don't lick your fingers. You weren't going to. Probably. Then it's time for rounds. 6 servants, limping guards, and 1 stable boy who swears he's dying but seems mostly dramatic. You watch the physician dab vinegar on a wound that makes your stomach twist. Keeps the humours in balance, he says. You nod like you understand. A woman coughs wetly in the corner. The physician places his palm on her forehead and then waves incense under her nose. Lung damp, he declares. You're not sure if that's a medical term or a weather report. Historians note that medieval medicine was a fascinating blend of real herbal knowledge, ancient superstition, and blind optimism. Bloodletting was common, as were plasters, made from everything from boiled moss to dried earthworms. You see several of those options on the shelf, you pretend not to, then come the leeches. Hold him still, the physician commands. The patient, a farmer with an impressive neck boil, squirms as the physician applies 2 fat leeches to his arm. They wiggle with enthusiasm. You look away and focus very hard on a jar labelled powdered mummy. You hope it's a joke. One quirky fact: powdered mummy, called mumia, wasn't a joke. In some parts of medieval Europe, it was considered a powerful medicine, ground-up remains of embalmed bodies, often imported or claimed to be from the Middle East, sold as a cure for everything from headaches to broken hearts. You wonder how many people actually got better. Probably not many. You help clean a shallow cut with wine, tie it up with linen, and hope for the best. Antibiotics don't exist. Germ theory is centuries away. All you've got is herbs, heat, and the occasional prayer. Sometimes the saints help, the physician mutters as he smears a paste onto someone's swollen knee. But sometimes they're busy. By noon, you're exhausted. You've seen too many boils, sniffed too many herbs, and carried far too many buckets of water that have now turned a suspicious shade of green. You stop to rest in the chapel. A monk is humming something that might be Latin. You sit near the candles, watching them flicker. The warmth is nice. The quiet is better. Someone sneezes behind you. You sigh. Back in the infirmary, things have taken a turn. A kitchen maid collapsed during morning chores. She's pale, sweating, eyes fluttering. The physician frowns deeply. Too much black bile, he says. You're not sure what that means, but he starts muttering about a mustard poultice and the placement of Venus. You hold her hand while he mixes something yellow and awful smelling. She squeezes your fingers so tight you wince. You offer her a sip of ale, and she manages a weak smile. Sometimes that's all you can do. Scholars still debate how effective medieval treatments were. Some herbs genuinely helped. Others were useless. Some, like mercury and arsenic, made things much worse. You glance nervously at a vial labelled quicksilver. You move it further back on the shelf. Later you help change bandages, clean a few minor wounds, even leech a nobleman's toe, which he swears was possessed by evil wind. You nod solemnly. He tips you a copper. You mentally plan what stale pastry you'll buy with it. At the end of the day you wash your hands in vinegar, again, and hang your rag to dry. The physician dismisses you with a grunt. You didn't faint, you'll do. High praise, really. You wander back to your chamber, hands still smelling of sage and something more metallic. Gregory meets you at the door, sniffing at your sleeves, possibly trying to determine if you've become food. You sit on your straw bed, sore and oddly grateful. Medicine here is messy, primitive, full of guesses. But there's something oddly noble about trying to keep people alive with only a jar of honey and a few desperate prayers. You lie back, stare at the ceiling, wonder if the girl with the cough is still breathing. Hope she is. The candle flickers, the fire pops. The leeches are far away now. You can sleep. You awaken to the heavy scent of smoke and goats, with something poking you in the back. You turn over. It's not straw. It's a shoe. Not yours. You scoot away and decide not to ask questions. Today, your luck changes. Or so you're told. You're being sent to help with courtly duties in the Great Hall. Linen's clean, the steward grunts. No mucking pigs. Try not to fall in love. You nod uncertainly. Why would I? Just go. And so you do. You arrive at the Great Hall mid-morning. Someone's brushing the soot off the tapestries. Another is dusting a carved wooden bench with a cloth so ragged it looks like a dead crow. You're handed a bucket and a rag and told to scrub the floor near the Lord's chair, the exact spot where his boots rest. Great. You start scrubbing, but your mind drifts, because today the hall is bustling, not with servants, but with people. A messenger has arrived. Important guests are coming, and the nobles are making themselves presentable, which means suddenly you're surrounded by layers of velvet, silks, and the sound of perfume bottles being uncorked. And then it hits you. The smell. Not a bad one, for once. Actually, quite pleasant. Rose oil, honey, maybe something like cloves. Someone wafts past you in a blue gown embroidered with vines, and the air trails after them like a breeze. You sniff your own sleeve and immediately regret it. One of the kitchen girls smirks at you. "Romance is in the air," she says, wiggling her eyebrows. You stare at her with all the weariness of someone who's scraped chamber pots with a butter knife. "Is that what that is?" she laughs. "You'll see." As the hall fills, you see it, all right. Noble sons and daughters are arriving from neighbouring estates, fresh-faced, perfumed, and wide-eyed. Most of them clearly haven't had to share a room with livestock in their lives. One of them, a boy your age with hair like spun wheat, steps too close to the hearth and sets his sleeve on fire. Two people clap. A servant rushes to put it out. Historians debate just how romantic court life actually was. Some argue that chivalric love was mostly a literary invention, something knights pined about in poetry, while never making eye contact with actual women. Others insist courtship was a real, if risky, part of castle life. Risky because, well, marrying wrong could get you exiled. Or worse, assigned to stable duty forever. Still, you watch as two young nobles pretend to be interested in a tapestry while whispering. You see a lady-in-waiting drop a ribbon accidentally in front of a young knight, who picks it up and blushes, and you, still kneeling by the lord's chair scrubbing a suspicious stain, begin to feel very, very out of place. Then the smell returns. This time, goat. You turn just in time to see the castle's resident goat wander into the great hall. He's wearing someone's bonnet. A prank, probably, but the goat seems proud. He pauses in front of the blue-gowned noblewoman. She screams. The goat bleats. You, unfortunately, laugh out loud. Everyone turns. The steward glares at you. Out! You're promptly reassigned to the corridor near the ladies' chambers. Less glamorous. Much quieter. You mop the flagstones in silence, listening to the muffled gossip of chambermaids and the rustle of stiff skirts. Later, you're called back into the great hall. The guests are dining now. You stand by the wall with the other lowly helpers, hands clasped, eyes on the floor. You're meant to fetch more bread or refill cups if someone waves. You're waved at a lot. And the conversation. Love, marriage, suitors, dowries. One girl laments that her fiancé only owns 2 manors. Someone else scoffs that one of the knights has hairy ears. You do your best not to laugh again. One quirky tidbit. Noble courtship often involved poetry exchanges, tokens like sleeves or handkerchiefs, and carefully supervised walks. Flirting could get you banished, or married, depending on who was watching. You refill a goblet, and the nobleman barely glances at you. You refill another, and the young woman actually says thank you. You blink. You might be in love. You shake it off and return to the kitchen, where the real world still exists. Fish guts, hot pans, and a boy crying because he burned his thumb. You bandage it with a scrap of linen and give him your piece of bread. He thanks you like you saved his life. As the day winds down, the great hall empties. The nobles vanish into chambers that smell better than yours ever will. You help roll up the rushes, gather the silverware, well, pewter, and scrub the goblets with vinegar until your hands turn prune-coloured. Back in your room, you sit heavily on your straw bed, now flattened to the memory of softness. You take off your boots. A leaf falls out. Possibly love, possibly goat. Gregory climbs onto your lap and licks your hand. You nod at him. At least you don't wear perfume. He sneezes. The candle burns low. The fire crackles faintly. Somewhere in the castle, a lute plays a slow, wistful tune. Maybe someone's still writing poetry. Maybe someone's stealing a kiss behind the stairs. You'll never know. But for now, you're warm, full, and marginally less smelly. And sometimes that's enough. You wake to the steady toll of a bell, low, rhythmic, and very, very early. This isn't the breakfast bell, it's the church bell. You groan and sit up, the straw poking your back like a medieval alarm clock. Gregory the rat blinks blearily at you from under your cloak and then curls back into sleep. You envy him. He doesn't have to confess his sins at sunrise. You stumble into your boots and make your way toward the chapel, clutching your cloak tight against the chill. A thin mist hangs in the air, and the sky is still more grey than blue. The stone floor numbs your feet through your soles, and your breath puffs visibly as you walk. Inside, the chapel is dim. Candles flicker weakly in iron sconces. The priest is already at the altar, muttering in Latin with the same enthusiasm one might bring to folding laundry. You slide into a pew. The wood creaks beneath you. and then the prayers begin. Monks, servants, squires. Everyone kneels, bows, mutters. You follow suit, though half your focus is on trying not to fall asleep during the paternoster. The man beside you is visibly dozing. You nudge him. He thanks you with a wheeze. It's easy to forget how deeply religion saturates castle life. Every day is divided not by clocks but by hours. Canonical hours, that is. Matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, nun, vespers, compline. Each with its own bell, its own prayer, its own brief interruption of whatever you were doing, no matter how important or inconvenient. You can't escape it, not even if you're ankle-deep in pig slop. Historians agree that the Church didn't just influence life in the Middle Ages, it shaped it. Births, deaths, marriages, meals, taxes, and even your Saturday plans all ran through the Church's hands. Today is Tuesday, and you already know it's a fasting day. The priest drones on. Today's sermon appears to be about humility. Or was it rain? It's hard to tell. You catch a reference to St. Cuthbert and the sin of prideful fishmongers, which raises more questions than it answers. After prayers, you're assigned to help prepare the chapel for a noble visit. You're handed a broom, a bundle of dried herbs, and instructions not to touch the relic. You didn't know there was a relic. Now you're definitely curious. You sweep quietly, watching the others polish candlesticks and fold stiff altar cloths. The floor is covered in old rushes and wax drippings, and every crevice in the stone seems determined to collect centuries of dust. You cough. No one reacts. Holy dust, apparently. You spot the relic in question, a small silver case housing what looks like a piece of bone. You don't get too close. Relics are powerful, sacred, and often disturbingly vague. Saint's knuckle, someone whispers. You nod reverently. Could be a knuckle. Could be a very old chicken wing. After the cleaning, you're ushered into the scriptorium, not to write, heavens no, but to hold a candle while Brother Alfred copies a page from a gospel. You stand still for nearly an hour, the wax dripping dangerously close to your fingers as he scratches out letters in brown ink, humming gently under his breath. One quirky detail. Monks and scribes often use strange ingredients in their inks. Soot, egg whites, wine, even urine. You stare at the page in front of you and try very hard not to wonder which one you're watching dry. By midday you're allowed to eat, but not much. Fasting days mean no meat, no eggs, no dairy. Your meal consists of boiled peas, a crust of bread, and a beet. Not a fancy beet, just a boiled one. You chew with the sadness of someone who remembers what goose tasted like 4 nights ago, and you're not alone in this penitence. Everyone fasts, nobles included. Though to be fair, the noble fasting meal includes spiced lentils and almond milk pudding. Yours includes crumbs, literal crumbs. You share them with Gregory, who takes them delicately and then glares at the beet. Afternoons on religious days are often quieter. You help tidy the scriptorium, carry books back to the library, more like a single locked room, and deliver a candle to a nun who needs it for prayer. She thanks you softly and blesses you. You suddenly feel 14% cleaner. Scholars still argue how sincerely people followed religious rules. Was it fear, faith, or habit? Maybe all 3. You don't know. You just know that if you skip Vespers tonight, someone will notice, and you'll end up scrubbing confession booths with vinegar. As twilight approaches, the bells ring again. Vespers. You file back into the chapel with the others, cloaks drawn tight against the evening chill. The priest is in better spirits now. He hums as he lights the altar candles and recites the prayers more brightly. The air is heavy with incense. You breathe in the scent of frankincense and wood smoke. Your stomach growls. Someone behind you whispers another prayer. You let the words wash over you, even if you don't catch every syllable. When Compline comes, it's late. You're exhausted. You kneel again, stiffly, offering your last quiet prayers of the day. For health, for warmth, for thicker stew. You keep it simple. You return to your chamber in silence, boots dragging. Gregory meets you halfway and climbs up your leg like a sleepy scarf. You don't stop him. You settle into your straw, your limbs aching from too much reverence and too little bread. The chapel bell rings one last time, soft and distant. You whisper a thanks you don't quite mean, but it feels right anyway. The bell doesn't ring this morning, not because it's broken, but because someone stole the clapper again. For a prank, you overhear, though there are darker rumours. Someone mutters it was sold off for beer. Someone else says it was melted down to patch a bucket. You suspect both are true. You stretch and shuffle into your boots, stepping over Gregory, who growls softly in his sleep. His little rat dreams must be intense. You nod to him and make your way out the door. Today, you're sent outside the castle gates for an errand. It feels thrilling, a little dangerous, and very cold. You wrap your cloak tight and accept a folded note for the reeve in the nearby village. Don't lose it, the steward warns, and don't dawdle. Bandits like dawdlers. Bandits. There's a cheery thought to start your walk. The drawbridge lowers behind you with a groan. You step off castle grounds and immediately feel lighter, mostly because the castle doesn't follow you out with its stink. The countryside stretches before you, muddy and brown, with little curls of smoke rising from huts in the distance. Birds chirp somewhere overhead. You breathe in and don't gag. Amazing. The path curves downhill and cuts through a patch of woods. You're told this is a safe route, but the fact that no one offered to come with you suggests it's safe enough for someone expendable. You clutch the note in one hand and your belt knife in the other, which is about as threatening as a butter spreader in a thunderstorm. After a half hour of trudging, you pass a man with a donkey cart. He nods. You nod. No one says anything. You both pretend you're not sizing each other up for thievery potential. Further along, you spot movement among the trees. You tense, but it's just a woman gathering firewood. She gives you a look that says, "I have no time for nonsense," and vanishes into the underbrush. Bandits, it turns out, don't usually make grand entrances. Historians still debate just how dangerous the medieval countryside truly was. Some records speak of constant attacks, robbery, ransom, worse. Others suggest it wasn't as bad as legend claims, especially in well-patrolled areas. You're in the middle, nervous but still alive. Eventually you reach the village. It's humble. That's the polite way of putting it. A handful of timber-framed houses, thatched roofs, smoke curling lazily upward. A pig squeals somewhere. A dog barks half-heartedly and then lies back down. You find the reeve by a cart, sorting a pile of soggy cabbage. You deliver the note. He reads it, grunts, hands you a pouch and tells you to get out before nightfall. Cheery fellow. As you turn to leave, you catch sight of the village stocks. A man is sitting in them, arms crossed, eyes closed. A turnip sits beside his head. It's unclear whether it was thrown or offered. You head back toward the castle, pouch tucked firmly under your arm, eyes scanning the woods for any sign of trouble. You pass the same donkey cart going the other way. The man tips his hat this time. Progress. Halfway home, clouds gather. You pick up your pace. The wind picks up, sharp and biting. You're cold, hungry, tired, but still, there's something strange about walking away from the castle that made you feel human again. Like you remembered what air was supposed to smell like. You reach the gate just as the rain starts. The guards barely glance at you before letting you in. You look wetter, one says. You nod. You are. Inside, everything feels smaller again. The familiar smells, ash, grease, goats, pressed down like a damp blanket. But it's safer here. Predictable. You know which corners to avoid, which planks creak, which pigs bite. And yet, there's a new tension in the air. Word is the local lord's been feuding with a neighbour. Something about sheep, or a fence, or maybe someone insulted someone's sister. Either way, it's escalating. There's talk of patrols, armed escorts, tolls, taxes, trouble. Feudalism, you're learning, is just organised pettiness with weapons. One quirky tidbit. Medieval roads were often dotted with checkpoints controlled by petty lords who taxed travellers just for passing through. If you had a cart, a pack animal, or even a large bag, you'd pay. If you didn't, sometimes you'd still pay. Some lords even built fake bridges just so they could charge you to cross them. Back inside, you report to the steward, hand over the pouch, and wait. He weighs it in his palm, nods once, then waves you off. No, thank you. No good job. Just a flick of the hand like you're a passing chicken. You trudge back to your chamber, remove your wet boots, and collapse onto the straw, ignoring the faint squish. Gregory, ever sensitive to your moods, brings you a crumb of bread. You accept it. He's not much for conversation, but he's loyal. The fire crackles softly. You shiver under your cloak and stare at the ceiling, trying to imagine what it's like to live in a world where you're not at the mercy of every petty squabble, every road tax, every nobleman with a grudge and a sword. You can't imagine it. Not yet. But you sleep anyway. because tomorrow you'll be back on your feet dodging tolls, hauling slop, and hoping the clapper thief doesn't strike again. You're jolted awake by shouting, loud, frantic, urgent. You bolt upright, heart racing, only to realise it's coming from outside. Through the slit window you catch flickers of torchlight bouncing against stone. You pull on your boots without lacing them and stumble out the door. The courtyard is a mess. A cart's overturned near the gate. A group of guards is gathered around something, or someone, on the ground. Smoke drifts lazily from a torch that's fallen and still smoulders in a puddle of last night's rain. You creep closer, heart thudding. It's a body. A man. One of the night watch. His eyes are open, his mouth twisted as if caught mid-sentence. A gash slices across his side, clean, deep, deliberate. Bandits didn't wait for the countryside. They came in. Someone's yelling orders. Seal the gates. Check the stables. Get the priest. Panic rolls through the castle like thunder. You're frozen until a hand grabs your shoulder and shoves a broom into your hands. Sweep the damn hall. Guests are coming anyway. Guests? Now? Apparently yes, because despite the murder in the courtyard, the Lord is still expecting envoys from a neighbouring domain. Negotiations, trade, maybe even marriage. Feudal politics don't pause for death. You go through the motions, sweeping, laying down fresh rushes, lighting candles that sputter in the damp. The hall fills with a brittle tension. No one talks above a whisper. Everyone glances toward the door. Then they arrive. Not with fanfare, but with weary horses and guarded eyes. 2 noblemen, cloaks heavy with rain, accompanied by a woman in a veil and a scribe scribbling constantly. They're greeted with polite murmurs and stiff bows. No one mentions the dead man by the gate. You return to your work, laying out cups, setting out trenchers, filling flagons. You notice something strange. Every guard is now armed. Inside. Not a good sign. Historians still debate whether such castle killings were handled with real investigations or just buried, figuratively and literally. The truth is, power worked differently then. Justice depended on your rank. If the man killed had been noble, chaos, but a watchman. The stew goes on as planned. There's muttering about retribution, about someone slipping through the postern gate, about a feud that may not be as cold as it seemed. You don't ask questions. You scrub the table harder. You glance toward the noblewoman. She's seated near the hearth, the firelight catching in the jewels of her veil. She hasn't spoken a word. Someone suggests she's the sister of one of the lords. Someone else whispers she's a widow from a rival house. Either way, she doesn't smile. Later, a dog begins to bark wildly. Not the castle dog, one of the street mutts. It races through the courtyard, yapping furiously at the well. No one pays it any mind. But something about its panic makes your skin crawl. You're sent to refill candles in the chapel, and as you walk past the gatehouse, you hear the guards arguing. One says the dead man had something in his hand when he was found. Another swears it was gone when the body was moved. Someone's lying. You lower your eyes and keep walking. One quirky truth about castle life. Secrets didn't stay secret. Not because people were nosy, though they were, but because walls were thin. Gossip travelled faster than arrows, and everyone depended on everyone else to survive. If something didn't leak, it meant people were too scared to speak. You help in the kitchen that evening, and the tension hasn't gone. No one laughs, no one sings. The jester has vanished. The cook snaps at everyone. Even the fire seems uncertain, flickering low and uneven. You deliver a tray to the scribe's room, bare, candlelit, papers everywhere. He's writing so fast his quill squeaks. You knock. He barely glances at you. Set it there. On your way back, you see something on the stairs. A smear. Dark. Fresh. You pause, then keep moving. You're just a servant. This isn't your story. You reach your chamber and collapse onto your straw. Gregory climbs onto your chest and watches you with beady concern. You stroke his back with one finger and whisper, "Don't tell anyone." He doesn't. The wind whistles against the shutters. Somewhere in the castle, a door creaks open and then slams shut. Heavy boots march past your door. Silence follows. You stare at the ceiling and wonder how long until another body shows up. You wonder if the nobleman will speak, if the man who found the body will change his story, if you'll be asked to carry something you don't want to know about. Feudalism isn't just taxes and land, it's fear, rank, retribution. The wrong word, the wrong glance, and you're in the oubliette. You roll over, tucking the blanket tighter, and hope that tomorrow brings quiet, and not another broom, soaked in blood, 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 soaked in blood.